The receptionist at Westfield Elementary looked at me like I'd lost my mind. I hadn't. I was losing it. There's a difference. Losing it is a process. And I was deep enough into that process to know exactly what I was doing and exactly how crazy it looked. I had both kids' birth certificates in a manila folder. I had my driver's license on the counter before she asked. I had the withdrawal forms already filled out because I downloaded them at 4 in the morning while my wife slept, and I sat on the bathroom floor scrolling through videos that nobody on television would talk about. Mr. Brewer, school dismisses in 90 minutes. If you could just... I need them now. She picked the vice principal's voice through the receiver, tinny and skeptical. I signed where they told me to sign. They brought Cora first, because third graders are closer to the office. She came down the hall holding her backpack by one strap, face scrunched with confusion, and said, "Dad, it's Tuesday." "I know." "Are we going to the dentist?" "No." Then Owen appeared behind her, 14 and already taller than me, wearing that expression he'd perfected over the past year, the one that mixed suspicion with embarrassment in equal portions. He didn't ask where we were going. He looked at the withdrawal paperwork on the counter, looked at me, and said, "Does Mom know?" "Mom knows we're leaving." That was technically true. Rachel knew I was taking the kids to Dale's farm. She did not know I'd pulled them out of school permanently. She did not know I'd cleaned out the savings account yesterday afternoon and converted half of it to cash at 3 different banks. She did not know I'd packed the truck at 2 in the morning with 6 duffel bags, 4 cases of water, a first aid kit that cost more than our mortgage payment, and every can of food from the basement pantry. She knew I was scared. She thought I was being dramatic. She told me Tuesday morning before she left for work that she loved me and that I needed to talk to someone professional about the anxiety. She kissed me on the mouth. She tasted like coffee and the peppermint lip balm she kept in her scrubs pocket. She said, "I'll see you Friday. Tell Dale I said hi." She was staying. That was the arrangement. That was the compromise we reached after 2 arguments and 1 silence that lasted 11 hours. I wanted her to come. She said she had patience. She said the hospital needed her. She said I was connecting dots that weren't there. She said she'd drive up Friday if I still felt this way. She said it gently, which made it worse, because gentle meant she thought I was fragile. I wasn't fragile. I was reading supply chain data from 3 countries, cross-referencing WHO situation reports with shipping manifests, and watching amateur footage from Kuala Lumpur that the platforms kept taking down, and people kept re-uploading faster. I wasn't fragile. I was early. I loaded the kids into the truck at 11:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in October. Cora buckled herself into the back seat and asked if she could have the tablet. Owen sat in the passenger seat with his arms folded and his jaw set. He didn't buckle until I started the engine. 400 miles, I said. We'll be at Uncle Dale's by dark if we push through. And if we don't push through, we push through. Owen turned his face to the window. The elementary school shrank in the mirror. My phone buzzed Rachel, probably, or my boss, definitely, since I'd emailed my resignation at dawn with 2 sentences and no notice. I put the phone in the center console face down. Interstate 70 was ordinary. Traffic was light, mid-morning calm, trucks hauling retail inventory to distribution centers that would be empty in 9 days. Nobody honked. Nobody swerved. The October sun sat low and golden over the flattening Indiana landscape, and the world looked exactly the way it always looked, which was the problem. It looked fine. It looked normal. And I was the man pulling his children out of that normalcy based on data I couldn't verify, patterns I couldn't prove, and a feeling in my chest that had graduated from worry to certainty at some point during the night, while my wife breathed softly beside me and I read a leaked internal memo from a logistics firm in Singapore about non-responsive handling personnel at a cold storage port. Cora fell asleep before we crossed the state line. Owen didn't speak for the first 90 miles. Not silent the way kids go silent when they're sulking, he was thinking. I could see it in the way his eyes tracked things outside the window, cataloging, measuring. He'd always been like that. Even at 5, he'd watch a room before entering it. Rachel used to say he had an old man's eyes in a kid's face. Now, at 14, the old man was winning. He broke the silence outside Indianapolis. You pulled us out, not just today. You withdrew us. Yes. That's not a sick day, Dad. That's permanent. I know what it is. Does Mom actually know that part? I let 2 miles pass before answering. She knows enough. That's a no. I glanced at him. He wasn't angry. He was building a case, the way he did when he wanted to renegotiate his curfew or argue his way out of a chore. Methodical, patient. Owen, I need you to trust me on this. You always say that when you don't have an answer. He was right, and I hated that he knew it. I hated more that the honest answer, I think something is coming that no one is prepared for. And I'd rather be wrong at your uncle's farm than right in our living room sounded exactly like the kind of thing a man says before his family stages an intervention. The gap between foresight and delusion is only visible in hindsight. Standing in the gap, you can't tell which side you're on. We stopped for gas in Terre Haute. I filled the tank and both 5-gallon reserves I'd strapped in the truck bed. The gas station was a travel center with a subway inside and a wall of beef jerky. Cora woke up and wanted chicken nuggets. I bought her a 6-inch turkey sub and a bag of apple slices and told her chicken nuggets didn't exist here. She accepted this with the resigned grace of an 8-year-old who has learned that road trips involve compromises. I stood by the truck and checked my phone. 11 messages. Rachel, 3. Escalating from curious to concerned to the clipped tone that meant she'd called the school. My boss, 2. Both professional, both asking me to reconsider. My mother, 1. Forwarded from Rachel, asking if I was okay. And Dale. 1 message from my brother, gates open, guest rooms made up. Come when you come, don't speed. Dale didn't ask why. He hadn't asked when I'd called him Sunday night and said I was bringing the kids. He'd said, how many days should I plan for? And I'd said, I don't know. And he'd said, I'll stock the freezer. Dale was 11 years older, ex-Army, divorced, working his 80 acres of soybeans and cattle outside Boonville, Missouri, with the help of 1 hired hand named Tomas and a collie mix named Sergeant. Dale didn't watch the news. He didn't need to. He'd spent 20 years preparing for something without naming it. And when his younger brother called sounding like the sky was falling, Dale just opened the gate. We crossed into Illinois at 2:15 p.m. Cora slept again. Owen read something on his phone, and I watched his face in my peripheral vision, looking for alarm, finding only concentration. He'd found it himself, whatever it was, the drip of information that the algorithms kept burying and the curious kept excavating. I knew because his scrolling had changed over the past 2 weeks. Slower, more deliberate. The way you scroll when you're not looking for entertainment but confirmation. He locked his phone and set it on his thigh. The Kuala Lumpur footage is back up. I know. Is that what this is about? Partly. What's the other part? The part where the footage keeps getting taken down and keeps coming back, and nobody official says anything about it. He chewed on that. Outside, The Illinois flatlands poured past. Corn stubble and sky. A semi passed us, doing 80, rocking the truck. Owen steadied himself against the door. "If you're wrong," he said, "you owe me a year of not being weird." "Deal." "And if you're right?" I didn't answer that. I turned up the radio, found static where a station should have been, found a different station playing Fleetwood Mac, and drove. The sun moved, the road unspooled. My hands didn't shake, which surprised me, because the rest of me was shaking in places that don't show. We passed a highway sign, Boonville. 214 miles, and I did the math. 3.5 hours. We'd be there before dark. I was wrong about that, too. The first roadblock was in Effingham. Not a police roadblock, a traffic snarl caused by a jackknifed cattle hauler blocking both westbound lanes of I-70. We sat in backed-up traffic for 40 minutes while Cora needed a bathroom, and Owen stared at his phone with increasing intensity. I could see the flashing lights of state troopers a quarter mile ahead. Normal accident, normal delay. Except the trucker who eventually walked back past our line of cars had a look on his face I recognized, not frustrated, not tired, but spooked. Like the cattle hauler hadn't jackknifed because of a tire blowout or a drowsy driver. Like something had happened in the cab that he didn't want to talk about, with his window down. I pulled off at the next exit and took Route 40 west. Slower, but moving. Cora asked why we left the big road. "Adventure," I said. "That's a lie," Owen said, but quietly, to the window. Route 40 wound through small towns Brownstown, Vandalia, Mulberry Grove. I'd driven this stretch once, years ago, when Dale and I had gone to an auction for a hay rake. The towns were the same as I remembered. Brick storefronts, grain elevators, churches with parking lots bigger than the buildings. What was different was the number of trucks in those parking lots on a Tuesday afternoon. Not church traffic, clusters of people standing around tailgates. I saw a woman carrying a case of bottled water into a Methodist church at 3 in the afternoon. I saw a man boarding up the front window of a feed store that had an open sign still lit. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. But I saw, and Owen saw, and the silence between us changed texture. We crossed into Missouri at 5:10 p.m. The bridge over the Mississippi was clear, but there was a Missouri Highway Patrol car parked on the far side with its lights off, and an officer standing outside with binoculars pointed east. He wasn't watching traffic. He was watching the river. I didn't understand why until later. I understand now. He was looking for movement on the water. Boats, rafts, things that shouldn't have been floating. Owen said, "Dad," and pointed south. Smoke. Not a controlled burn, wrong color, wrong volume. A black column rising from somewhere downriver, thick and tilting in the wind. The kind of smoke that means a structure fully involved. I watched it in the mirror until a bend in the road took it away. "Probably a warehouse fire," I said. Owen didn't answer. He was typing on his phone. I let him. Dale's farm sits 12 miles south of Boonville on a county road that doesn't have a name, just a number, County Road 421. You turn off the blacktop onto gravel, drive past a soybean field, cross a one-lane bridge over Pettit Saline Creek, and the farmhouse appears behind a line of Osage orange trees that Dale's grandfather planted in 1951. I'd been here 100 times. Family Christmases, summer weeks, the month after Dale's divorce when I came out to help with the harvest, and we didn't talk about anything important, and that was the help. We pulled through the gate at 6:48 p.m. The sun was low, orange through the trees. Sergeant came running before the truck stopped, barking the way he barked at everything, not aggressive, just announcing. Dale walked out of the barn wiping his hands on a rag. He was 51, built like a fence post, and wearing the same Carhartt jacket he'd worn for a decade. Cora launched herself out of the truck. "Uncle Dale." He caught her, swung her once, set her down, looked at me over her head. I saw his eyes sweep the truck, the duffel bags, the water cases, the gas cans. He didn't flinch. "Drove straight through?" he asked. "Mostly." "Kids eat?" "Terre Haute." "I've got chili on." He looked at Owen, who was standing by the passenger door with his phone in his hand and his face unreadable. "Hey, bud, you've grown?" Dale nodded once, like that was all the greeting two serious men required, and led us inside. The kitchen smelled like cornbread and cumin. Tomas was at the table, already eating. And he stood when we came in and shook my hand with the careful grip of a man who doesn't know why guests are arriving on a weekday, but knows not to ask. Cora ate 2 bowls of chili and told Dale about every book she was currently reading. Owen ate 1 bowl and said nothing. I ate nothing and went outside and sat on the porch step and called Rachel. She answered on the first ring. "The school called." "I know." "You withdrew them, Marcus. You didn't tell me you were withdrawing them." "I should have told you." "You should not have done it." Rachel's voice had that quality, not loud, not sharp, but compressed, like she was holding the full volume of what she felt inside a professional container and only letting the edges out. She was still at the hospital. I could hear the PA system behind her, that 3-tone chime before an announcement. She'd stepped into a hallway or a break room, somewhere semi-private, somewhere she could be furious at a controlled volume. "Marcus, listen to me carefully. I love you. I am not questioning your love for those kids. But you made a unilateral decision about their education, their stability, their entire routine, without my agreement. And you did it while I was at work, so I couldn't stop you. I didn't do it to get around you. You did it at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday while I was in a 12-hour shift. That's timing, Marcus. That's strategy." She was right. Not about the strategy, I hadn't planned it that way. But the effect was the same. I'd acted while she couldn't intervene, and the distinction between couldn't and chose not to was exactly the kind of distinction that dissolves in a marriage when trust is under pressure. "Rach, did you see the Effingham footage?" "I don't know what that is." "A cattle hauler jackknifed on I-70 this afternoon. The driver, Marcus, stop. I need you to hear what I'm saying. You're connecting things that aren't connected. You're not sleeping. You resigned from your job by email. You emptied the savings. These are not the actions of a man thinking clearly. What if they're the actions of a man who's thinking further ahead than everyone around him?" The silence that followed was the worst kind. The kind where someone who loves you is recalibrating how worried to be. I could hear her breathing. I could hear the hospital behind her, functioning, normal, fluorescent lit and staffed and operational, proving her right. Everything was still fine. The world was still working. And I was sitting on a porch in Missouri with our kids inside eating chili, having burned every bridge behind me based on patterns that could easily be coincidence. "I'm coming Friday," she said. "We'll talk about everything Friday." "Okay. Tell my kids I love them. Our kids. Tell them." She hung up. I sat on the step. Sergeant came and put his head on my knee. The Missouri dark was total, no street lights, no neighbors close enough to see. Stars from horizon to horizon. Crickets. A coyote yipped once, far off. The kind of night that makes you feel either safe or exposed, depending on what you brought with you. Dale came out with 2 mugs, coffee, black. He sat beside me on the step, and for a while we just drank and listened to the dark. "Rachel mad?" he asked. "Rachel's scared. She expresses it as mad. She coming?" "Friday." He nodded, sipped. Then, "I moved the cattle into the near pasture today. Topped off the diesel tank. Tomas and I checked the fence line this morning, west side, tight." I looked at him. He wasn't asking me to justify myself. He was showing me what he'd done in response to my call, quietly, without drama, the way he did everything. Dale had never once in my life said, "I believe you." He just acted in the direction of belief and let the action speak. "The well pumps on its own circuit," he continued. "Generator can run the house and the barn for 3 weeks on what I've got stored. 4 if we're careful. Tomas brought his cousin's hunting rifles over this morning. Didn't ask him to. He just did it. Tomas knows. Tomas watches different channels than you do. He knew before you called." That landed somewhere in my chest. Tomas, quiet and polite at the dinner table, had been watching the same patterns I had, in a different language, on different platforms, reaching the same conclusion. I wasn't alone in seeing it. I was alone in my family for seeing it. Those are different kinds of alone. "Go to bed, Marcus. Kids are already down. Nothing's happening tonight." He was right. Nothing happened that night, or the next, or the next. 3 days passed, and the farm was ordinary. And I started to wonder if Rachel was right after all. Wednesday through Friday moved at the speed of doubt. I woke at 5 each morning because the farm woke at 5. Dale's boots on the kitchen floor, the coffee maker gurgling, Sergeant's nails clicking on the linoleum as he followed Dale to the barn. I'd lie in the guest room bed listening to the sounds of a working farm and feel the architecture of my certainty begin to soften. Cora adapted instantly, the way 8-year-olds adapt to anything that includes animals and unstructured time. By Wednesday afternoon, she was helping Tomas feed the cattle, naming each one, despite his gentle insistence that naming beef cattle was a heartbreak in training. She named the biggest steer and the smallest calf Biscuit, and told Dale at dinner that she wanted to be a rancher when she grew up. Dale said, "Talk to me after your first January here." She didn't know what that meant. He didn't explain. Owen was harder to read. He helped where asked, carrying feed bags, stacking firewood, holding the gate while Dale moved cattle between pastures. He did the work without complaint. But twice I caught him sitting on the fence behind the barn, phone in hand, scrolling with that slow, deliberate rhythm, his face drawn tight. He wasn't looking at social media. He was monitoring. Wednesday evening, I found him in the hayloft with his phone plugged into an extension cord he'd run from the barn outlet. He'd organized a folder of bookmarked news articles, government press releases, flight tracking data, Reddit threads with verified timestamps. "Close the door," he said. Not conspiratorial, clinical. I climbed up and sat on a hay bale beside him. He turned his phone so I could see. "This is Incheon Airport, South Korea. Wednesday morning local time. All outbound flights canceled. Not delayed canceled. This is the port of Rotterdam. Container ships rerouted to open sea with no destination filed. And this," he scrolled, "is a satellite image someone pulled from a European Space Agency archive. Kuala Lumpur International Airport, parking structure B. You can see the vehicles, hundreds of them. Nobody's come back for their cars in 11 days. Where'd you get the satellite image?" "A forum. The guy who posted it works for a mapping company. He got fired 6 hours after posting it. Someone screen grabbed it before it went down." I looked at the image. Tiny white and silver rectangles filling a parking structure, orderly as a diagram, abandoned. "Owen, some of this could be—" "I know. Could be coincidence, could be misread. Could be a 14-year-old connecting dots because his dad's anxiety is contagious. He locked the phone. But the dots are there, Dad. I didn't put them there. We sat in the hayloft and listened to the cattle shifting below us. The barn smelled like hay and diesel and the particular musty sweetness of a building that has stood for decades, doing one thing well. Your mom comes tomorrow, I said. She won't come. She said Friday. She said Friday before effing him, before the Rotterdam thing. She'll say the hospital needs her. She'll say she can't leave her patients. You don't know that. He looked at me with those old man eyes. Dad, you married a person who runs toward the emergency. That's why you love her, and that's why she's not coming. Friday morning, Rachel called at 6 a.m. Her voice was different, not angry, not compressed, but thin, stretched. There's something at the hospital. They're calling it atypical encephalitis. 12 patients since last night. They're not Marcus. They're not responding to anything. The neurologist has never seen this presentation. I can't leave. Rach, I'm sorry, I know. I hear how this sounds, but I have patience. Bring them. Drive here, now. I can't abandon 12 people in acute neurocrisis, because my husband has a theory. It's not a theory anymore, Rachel. Static, or breathing, or both. Then, I'll call you tonight. I love you. Kiss the kids. She hung up. Owen was standing in the kitchen doorway. He'd heard. He didn't say anything. He just walked outside and started helping Tomas move hay bales to reinforce the fence around the near pasture, working with a focus that was not a 14-year-old's focus. It was preparation. It was a boy building a wall because his mother wasn't coming. And he understood, before I did, that walls were the language now. Saturday broke wrong. I felt it before I had evidence of texture in the air, like barometric pressure but psychological, the way animals go quiet before a storm, even though the sky looks fine. Dale was already in the kitchen when I came down at 5. He wasn't making coffee. He was sitting at the table with a battery-powered radio. The old kind, with a dial and an antenna you extend by hand. Tomas was beside him. They were both leaning toward the speaker the way men lean toward a thing they don't want to hear. Sit down, Dale said. The radio was tuned to a Kansas City AM station. The broadcaster's voice was professional but fraying at the seams. The sound of a person reading copy they don't believe or believe too much. Interstate 70 closed westbound at Columbia. National Guard deployed to St. Louis Lambert Airport. Shelter-in-place advisory for Jackson, Clay, and Platte counties. The words, aggressive neurological event, used 4 times in 2 minutes. Then the station cut to dead air. Then a different voice came on, younger, less controlled. We are experiencing, we're told to, I'm sorry, we're going to step away from the desk for... Then static. Dale turned the dial. Found a Sedalia station. A woman's voice, steady but fast. Repeating, the Missouri Highway Patrol has established checkpoints on all major routes into the Kansas City metropolitan area. Do not approach these checkpoints unless directed. If you encounter an individual exhibiting signs of extreme aggression, disorientation, or unresponsiveness to verbal commands, do not approach. Do not attempt to render aid. Return to your vehicle and... Dale clicked it off. Looked at me. Your wife, he said. It wasn't a question. I called Rachel, straight to voice again. Voicemail. Texted, please call me. Please tell me you're leaving. The message showed delivered. No read receipt. No reply. Owen appeared in the doorway. He'd heard the radio. His face was a locked door. She's not answering, I said. She's working, Owen said. She's in the middle of it, and she's working." He said it flat, like a fact that didn't need emotion attached, like a boy reciting something he'd already rehearsed in his head. But his hands were in his pockets, and I could see his knuckles pressing against the denim from the inside, white with pressure. Cora came downstairs in her pajamas. She felt the room immediately kids read rooms the way seismographs read tremors, registering the thing before they can name it. She sat at the table and didn't ask for breakfast. "What happened?" she said. Dale answered before I could. "Some roads are closed, Cora. Nothing here. We're fine here." He said it with the same voice he used for skittish cattle calm, low, certain. Cora looked at him, then at me, measuring the gap between his tone and my face. "Dad, are you scared?" "A little." "Okay." She thought about this. "Can I still feed Biscuit?" "After breakfast." She nodded, filed it, and went to the counter to make toast. I watched her and felt something shift in my chest. Not fear, but a brutal, clarifying awareness that she trusted me completely, that her calm was built on my foundation, and that my foundation was a guess. Dale stood. "Tomas, let's walk the fence line. Full perimeter." He looked at me. "Marcus, gate. Nobody in or out without my say. I don't care if it's the mailman, the county sheriff, or the Archangel Gabriel." They went out. I stood at the kitchen window and watched them cross the yard toward the west pasture. Dale's stride long and unhurried, Tomas matching it, both men carrying rifles they hadn't been carrying yesterday. The gate was a cattle gate, tubular steel, 12 feet wide, latched with a chain and a pin. I drove the truck across the gravel and parked it perpendicular behind the gate, blocking it. Then I sat in the cab and watched County Road 421 disappear into the trees, a quarter-mile of gravel running straight to the blacktop. It was 6:15 a.m. on a Saturday in October. The sky was clear. The soybeans were golden in the early light, almost ready for harvest. Somewhere south, a bird sang 3 notes and stopped. And in the silence that followed, I heard what might have been a siren, very far away, or might have been the wind through the Osage orange trees, or might have been nothing at all. My phone buzzed. "Rachel, I love you. Hospital is locked down. Stay there." I read it 7 times. The 8th time I called. Voicemail. Owen came and stood beside the truck, looking down the road. He didn't speak. We stood there together, father and son, watching the empty road. And I understood for the first time that the worst part of being right is that everyone you failed to convince is still out there being wrong, and some of them have your wife's face. Sunday was the day the road stopped being empty. The first car arrived at 10 a.m. A silver Honda Accord with Kansas plates moving fast on the gravel, trailing a rooster tail of dust that hung in the still air like a signal flare. It stopped at the gate. A man got out. Mid-30s, khakis, polo shirt, the kind of clothes a person wears to brunch and then never changes out of because the world pivoted while he was eating eggs. He had a woman in the passenger seat and 2 kids in the back, both under 5. "Please," he said. He said it to me through the gate, gripping the tubular steel with both hands. "The interstate is closed. We've been driving back roads for 6 hours. The kids haven't eaten since last night." I looked at him. I looked at the woman in the car, who was staring straight ahead with her hands on the dashboard. I looked at the 2 small shapes in the back seat. "Wait here," I said. I found Dale in the barn. "People at the gate." "How many?" 4, 2 adults, 2 little kids. Kansas plates. He put down the wrench he was holding. "They sick?" "They look scared." "Scared's not sick. He walked with me to the gate. He looked at the man, the car, the children. He looked at the woman who had gotten out now and was holding the smaller child on her hip. The child was asleep, head on her shoulder, thumb in its mouth. "Where'd you come from?" Dale asked. "Overland Park. We left yesterday afternoon when the sirens started. My brother-in-law has a place near Tipton, but the road was blocked. I've been driving in circles." "Anybody in that car hurt? Bitten? Any marks on anyone?" The man blinked. "Bitten? No. What do you mean, bitten?" Dale and I looked at each other. The man didn't know what it was yet. He'd fled the sirens and the highway closures, but he hadn't seen the thing itself. He was running from effects without having seen the cause. "I'm Dale Brewer. This is my farm. I'm going to open this gate, and you're going to drive through and park by the barn. You don't leave the yard without telling me. You don't use the phone to broadcast our location. You help where you're asked. Those are the terms." The man nodded so fast his head blurred. "Yes, anything. Thank you." His name was Scott Keller. His wife was Dana. Their kids were Lily, 4, and James, 2. Scott was a financial analyst. Dana taught 4th grade. They had 1 suitcase and a diaper bag and half a tank of gas and nothing else. Cora took custody of Lily within 15 minutes, leading her to the pasture fence to meet Professor and Biscuit with the gravity of an ambassador conducting a diplomatic tour. Tomas heated soup. Dana sat at the kitchen table and cried quietly into a paper towel for 10 minutes while her husband stood behind her with his hand on her shoulder and his eyes closed. Owen pulled me aside in the hallway. "You let them in." "Dale let them in." "There'll be more." "I know. We have food for 8 people for maybe 3 weeks. 10 people changes the math." "I know, Owen. I'm not saying we shouldn't have. I'm saying the math changed and nobody acknowledged it." He was right. And he was 14. And he was already doing triage arithmetic in his head. And I wanted to tell him to stop, to be a kid, to let me carry the calculations. But I couldn't, because his calculations were correct and mine were slower. And the gap between us had shifted overnight from father and son to something I didn't have a name for yet. The second car arrived at 2 p.m., the third at 4. By sundown, Dale's farm held 14 people. Me, Owen, Cora, Dale, Thomas the Kellers, an elderly couple named Martin and Phyllis Crow, who'd driven from Sedalia in a Buick, with a handwritten sign in the back window that said, "Please don't shoot, we're just old." And a woman alone named Elena Voss, who arrived on foot from the north carrying a backpack and a tire iron, and who said 4 words when Dale asked where she'd come from. "It's bad up there." Dale closed the gate at dark, chained it, parked his tractor behind it. I stood on the porch and counted headlights on the distant blacktop. 3, 4, 5 vehicles moving fast with no headlights, just shapes against the tree line. Not coming toward us, going somewhere, or fleeing something. The radio that night was mostly static. One station, AM 1090 out of Jefferson City, played a looping recording. "This is an emergency broadcast. Shelter in place. Avoid contact with affected individuals. Assistance is being coordinated." It played every 4 minutes, exactly every 4 minutes. Nobody was at the station. The recording was running on its own, speaking to an audience that might or might not exist, a voice without a listener, a lighthouse with no ships. I tried Rachel 11 times. Voicemail, voicemail, voicemail. Monday morning, Elena Voss told us what bad up there meant. She told it to the kitchen table, all the adults, seated or standing, coffee in hand. Cora and Lily banished to the living room with a coloring book, and Owen standing in the doorway because no one had the energy to argue about whether 14 was old enough to hear this. Elena was a veterinary technician from Marshall, 20 miles north. She was compact, direct, the kind of woman who made eye contact without flinching and waited for you to flinch first. She'd left Marshall on foot Saturday night after barricading her apartment against her downstairs neighbor, who had stopped being her downstairs neighbor at approximately 10 p.m. Friday. "He was dead," she said. "I watched him die. Cardiac arrest in the parking lot. The EMTs were there, they called it. They put the sheet on him. Then the sheet moved." Nobody spoke. The EMTs ran. One of them didn't run fast enough. The neighbor, the body, it moved wrong. Not like a person moves, like a person-shaped thing trying to remember how joints work. It grabbed the slow EMT by the sleeve and bit through his forearm down to the bone. I watched from my window. I didn't go outside. I locked my door and pushed the couch against it and sat there for 18 hours listening to things move in the hallway that didn't move the way people move. She said it without performance, without tremor. Clinical. Like she was describing a procedure she'd observed at the vet clinic. Unusual, disturbing, but categorizable. Saturday night, I heard glass break downstairs. I went out my bedroom window, dropped to the back lawn, walked south. I walked 12 miles. I saw your gate. I chose your gate because it was closed and nothing else was. Dale asked the question I couldn't. "How many? In Marshall?" "I don't know. Enough that the streets weren't safe. I saw maybe 30 people on my walk south, living people, in cars or on foot, all going somewhere fast. I saw 6 that weren't living people anymore. You can tell the difference by how they stand. The living leaned forward. The others are just vertical, straight up and down, like something is holding them by the top of the spine." Martin Crow, 73, retired electrician, set down his coffee mug with exaggerated care. "I'm going to need someone to say the word that nobody in this room is saying." "The word doesn't matter," Elena said. "The behavior does. They bite. The bitten die. The dead get up. That's the cycle. Whatever name you put on it doesn't change the math." Owen said, from the doorway, 24 to 36 hours. Everyone looked at him. "Incubation," he said. "Based on the timestamps in the Kuala Lumpur footage and the timeline from the Incheon reports. Bite to death, 4 to 12 hours depending on the wound. Death to reanimation, 12 to 24 hours. Total cycle, 24 to 36. Elena stared at him. "How old are you?" 14? "You're not wrong. Your son's been doing homework." I felt something in that moment that I still can't fully name. Pride, yes. Terror, yes. But underneath both, a disorientation, like standing on a surface that had always been level and feeling it tilt. Owen had just provided tactical intelligence to a room full of adults, sourced and time-stamped, and no one had questioned it. He'd stepped into a space that was supposed to be mine, the space of the person who knew, who'd seen it first, who'd acted on the pattern, and he'd filled it more completely than I ever had. Dale stood. "All right. Here's what we're doing today. Tomas and I are reinforcing the west fence. It's cattle fence. It'll slow a person, but it won't stop one. We need posts doubled and wire tightened. Marcus, I need you on water inventory. Count everything. Elena, you're medical. I want to know what we have in the first aid kit and what we're missing. Scott?" He looked at the financial analyst, who was gripping his mug with both hands. "You're on firewood. Phyllis, Martin, you're on food. Every can, every bag, every jar. Count it. Write it down." Nobody argued. Nobody asked who put Dale in charge. He was in charge the way the barn was in the right place, by fact, not election. Owen followed me to the mudroom where the water was stored. He counted while I wrote. "Dad," he said halfway through. "Yeah. She's probably okay. The hospital has generators. It has walls. She's smart." I wrote down 24 and didn't look up because if I looked at him, I was going to fall apart. And falling apart was a luxury I'd given up when I turned the key in Terre Haute 5 days ago. The first one came to the fence on Tuesday. Not the gate, the fence. West side, where the soybeans met a tree line that ran along Petite Saline Creek. Thomas saw it first. He came to the house at a walk, not a run, which was worse because it meant he'd already assessed the threat and decided speed wasn't the variable that mattered. "One," he said. "West fence, in the trees." Dale picked up the rifle by the door. I picked up the second one, a bolt-action .30-06 that I'd fired twice in my life. Both times at paper targets, both times missing. We walked to the west pasture. The cattle were clustered at the far end, pressed against the east fence, stamping and blowing. Animals know. Whatever frequency this thing broadcasts on, animals receive it first. He was standing in the tree line about 40 yards from the fence. Male, middle-aged, wearing a button-down shirt with one sleeve torn off at the shoulder. He wasn't moving toward us. He was standing exactly the way Elena had described, vertical, held from above like a marionette at rest. His head moved in small increments, tracking something. Tracking us. "Don't shoot unless he comes through the wire," Dale said. We stood and watched. He stood and watched. This went on for 10 minutes. I could hear Cora's voice from the house, saying something to Lily, the sound carrying across the pasture like a bell across water. The man's head tilted toward the sound. Then he walked forward. Not fast, not slow. That mechanical, joint-remembering gait Elena had described. He reached the fence and pressed against it. The wire bowed, but held. He pressed harder. His hands gripped the wire, and I could see the barbs cutting into his palms, blood running down the steel. And he didn't react to the pain because pain was a message for the living, and he wasn't receiving messages anymore. Dale shot him from 20 yards. The sound cracked across the farm and scattered birds from every tree in the creek bottom. Cora screamed. I heard it. I'll hear it for the rest of my life, my daughter's scream, not understanding what made the sound. Just knowing the sound meant the world had changed again. Owen was at the west fence in 3 minutes, running. He looked at the body and the wire. He looked at the blood. He looked at Dale, who was already walking back to the house. We need to clear the tree line, Owen said. They'll use the creek bed for cover. It's a natural corridor. He was talking about fields of fire. He was 14 years old and talking about fields of fire. And I stood there holding a rifle I could barely shoot and realized I had nothing to teach him that he hadn't already taught himself from YouTube videos and tactical forums and the cold mathematics of survival that his generation absorbed the way mine had absorbed Saturday morning cartoons. Dale heard him, stopped walking, turned around. You're right, he said. Tomas, chainsaw. They spent the afternoon clearing brush from both sides of the creek for 100 yards in each direction from the fence. Owen worked alongside them, dragging branches, stacking them for burning. I watched from the porch where Dale had stationed me to watch the road. The road stayed empty. That was the new fear, not what came down it, but the emptiness, the absence of traffic that should have been there. No mail truck, no school bus, no combines moving between fields. The world had stopped driving past, and the silence where its engine noise used to be was louder than any siren. Cora came out to the porch at 4 o'clock. She had Lily's hand in hers, She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before, composed, serious, older. Dad, that was a gun. Yes. Uncle Dale shot something. Yes. Was it one of the sick people? I looked at my 8-year-old daughter. She'd named it herself. Not monsters, not zombies, not the Walking Dead. Sick people. Because she was 8 and still categorized by compassion. And the word sick preserved the humanity that every other word erased. Yes, sweetheart, it was. Are there more? Maybe. She processed this. Squeezed Lily's hand. Then we should help more. How? I don't know yet, but I'll think about it. She went back inside. Lily followed, trusting, silent. I sat on the porch with the rifle across my knees and understood that Cora was already adapting, already reorganizing her world around the new information, already moving forward while I was still standing at the fence watching a dead man bleed into the wire. By Thursday, 12 days after I'd pulled them out of school, Owen was running the watch schedule. Not because Dale asked him to, because Owen identified a gap, built a rotation in a spiral notebook, and posted it on the kitchen wall at 6 a.m. with assignments for every adult, 8-hour shifts, overlapping coverage on the west and south perimeters. Dale looked at it over his coffee, looked at Owen, looked at me. That work for you? Dale said. To Owen, not to me. It works if people actually keep their shifts. Scott fell asleep on South Watch last night. I covered for him, but it can't happen again. I'll talk to Scott. I already did. Dale took a slow drink of his coffee. I saw something pass across his face, not irritation, not amusement, but recognition. The same recognition I'd seen when Owen was 5 and disassembled the VCR to see how it worked and then reassembled it correctly from memory. Dale was seeing what I was seeing. Owen was not becoming capable. Owen was capable, had been capable. And the crisis had simply burned away the social architecture that had kept a 14-year-old in his designated lane. The problem was, his designated lane was my lane. I was the one who'd seen the pattern. I was the one who'd pulled them out of school. I was the one who'd driven 400 miles on instinct and data and the kind of paternal certainty that doesn't ask for consensus. I'd been right. And being right had been my role. The anxious father vindicated, the early mover justified, the man who acted while others hesitated. Now Owen was running the watch. Owen was mapping the creek corridor. Owen was teaching Elena how to read the movement patterns, which directions they approached from, what times of day, how sound drew them, how stillness released them. Owen had taken my foresight and converted it into operational competence that made my foresight look like what it was. A one-time act of intuition followed by standing around. I don't mean he disrespected me. He didn't. He was careful, almost formal, about routing decisions through Dale and including me in discussions. But the deference was itself the tell he was managing me. The way you manage a senior employee whose title exceeds their contribution. He asked my opinion and then gently improved upon it. He brought me updates I hadn't requested. He said, "Dad, what do you think?" In a tone that meant he'd already thought and was giving me the dignity of being consulted. Wednesday night, I'd overheard him talking to Elena by the barn. "Your dad's smart," Elena said. "He saw this coming." He did. Most people didn't. Most people aren't my dad. A pause. But seeing it coming and knowing what to do about it aren't the same skill. He wasn't wrong. Foresight and execution are different muscles. I'd used the first one brilliantly and was floundering with the second. I couldn't shoot accurately. I didn't know farm infrastructure the way Dale did. I wasn't calm under physical threat the way Tomas was. I wasn't medically trained like Elena. I wasn't even practically useful the way Martin Crow was, rewiring the barn's electrical panel to run off the generator more efficiently. I was the man who'd known. And knowing, it turned out, was a role with a very short shelf life. Thursday afternoon, 3 of them came through the south tree line together. Not the staggered, accidental approach we'd seen before a cluster, moving in the same direction, drawn by something. We'd learn later it was the generator. They tracked sound the way mosquitoes track carbon dioxide, a tropism so basic it felt mechanical. Owen saw them first from the south watch post. He radioed Dale. Dale and Thomas went to the fence with rifles. Owen came down from the watch post and flanked east, carrying the .22 Dale had given him 2 days earlier, moving through the soybean stubble in a low, efficient crouch that he'd learned from a video and practiced in the pasture until it was muscle memory. They reached the fence. Dale and Thomas dropped too. The third got tangled in the wire, and Owen put a round through its temple from 30 yards on one knee without hesitation. He stood up, looked at us. His hands weren't shaking, mine were. He walked back to the watch post. I stood in the field holding a rifle I hadn't fired and watched my son walk away from his first kill with a steadiness that terrified me. Not because it was wrong, but because it was exactly right, exactly what survival required. And it was a capacity I did not share and could not teach, because he'd acquired it without me. Friday, 2 weeks since I'd pulled them out of school, I tried to reassert myself, and it broke something. Dale had proposed a supply run to a farm 3 miles east. The Hensley place, abandoned since the previous spring, when old Emmett Hensley went to a nursing home in Sedalia. There'd be diesel, possibly livestock feed, tools, fencing material. Dale wanted to take Thomas and go at first light. I should go, not unkindly. I should go, I repeated. I know the Hensley Road. I drove it with you 4 years ago. I'm not doing enough here, Dale. I need to contribute more than water counts. You're contributing fine. I'm not contributing fine. I'm standing on the porch holding a gun I can't shoot while my 14-year-old runs tactical operations. I need to go. Dale's silence had layers. He was measuring me, not my capability, which he already knew, but my motivation. He was determining whether I wanted to go because the farm needed me to go, or because I needed to go. The answer was the second one, and we both knew it. Take Owen, he said. Owen stays here. Owen's a better shot than you. Owen's faster. Owen keeps his head. Owen is 14. Owen is the most operationally effective person on this property who isn't me or Thomas, and you know it. He said it without cruelty. He said it the way he'd tell me a fence post was rotten factually, because the fact mattered more than my feelings about the fact. Dale, he's my son. I'm not taking my son on a supply run into unsecured territory. Then I'm taking Tomas, and you're staying here. He went. I stayed. Owen stayed. But something had cracked, and Owen heard it crack, because when Dale's truck disappeared down County Road 421 at dawn, Owen came and stood beside me at the gate and said, "He's right, you know." About what? About me. I should have gone. You're 14. What does that mean now, Dad? He wasn't being defiant. He was genuinely asking. What does 14 mean when there are things in the trees that eat people? Does 14 mean I don't stand watch? Does it mean I don't shoot? Because I'm doing both of those things already. The only thing 14 means now is you won't let me go past the fence, and the fence is where the problem is. I stood there. The morning was cold, the first real cold of fall. and my breath came out in plumes that dissolved against the gray sky. My son was standing beside me, asking me to let him be what the world required. And I was holding him back because holding him back was the last act of fatherhood I recognized. Your mother would never forgive me. Mom's not here. It hit like a slap, not because it was cruel, because it was true, and because the truth contained a blade he hadn't meant to unsheath. Rachel wasn't here. Rachel was in a locked-down hospital 400 miles east, not answering her phone, possibly alive, probably working. Maybe already one of the sick people Cora still prayed for at bedtime. Rachel wasn't here, and her absence instead of 4. And one of those legs was a 14-year-old who'd grown 3 inches since October and could shoot a moving target at 30 yards and was asking me to stop pretending he was a child. Dale came back at noon with a truck bed full of diesel cans, fencing wire, and a hand-crank grain mill that Martin Crow wept over because it meant bread. Tomas had a cut on his forearm from barbed wire and a distant look that meant they'd encountered something at the Hensley place they weren't talking about in front of the others. That night, after the kids were asleep, Dale told me. 4 of them in the Hensley barn. Recent. They were Marcus. They were wearing church clothes. Sunday best. These were people who went to church and died there and walked to the nearest enclosed space and stood inside it, packed together like cattle in a stall. Tomas cleared the barn. I couldn't do it. Not the ones in church clothes. He drank his coffee. His hand was steady. His voice was not. Your boy's right, he said. You need to let him be what he's becoming. Holding him at 14 isn't protecting him. It's protecting you. I went to bed. I lay in the dark listening to Cora breathe in the next room, and Owen typed softly on his phone in the room beyond that. And I understood that the man who pulled his kids out of school to save them was now the man whose kids had outgrown the saving. And the distance between those 2 men was 14 days and 1,000 years. The breaking point came Saturday, and it came through Cora. Owen was the obvious transformation, visible, measurable, tactical. But Cora's change was deeper because it was quieter. And I'd missed it because I was so focused on Owen that I forgot 8-year-olds have their own way of adapting. And their way is more fundamental than a teenager's because it doesn't route through rebellion or competence. It roots through reclassification. Cora was reclassifying the world, and I didn't see it until she showed me. She'd been keeping a notebook. Thomas had given it to her, a lined composition book from a stack Dale kept in the office. I thought she was drawing, journaling, the kind of thing teachers encourage and parents praise. She showed it to me Saturday morning while I was on porch watch. It was a census. Every person on the farm listed by name with notes. Dale knows animals, fixes things, has gun. Thomas strong, quiet, knows plants. Elena knows medicine, very brave. Martin fixes wires, funny. Phil is cooking, nice voice, tells stories. Scott tries hard, scared a lot. Dana good with Lily, cries sometimes. Owen watches everything, doesn't sleep enough. Then my entry. Dad brought us here, loves us the most, doesn't know what to do now. I read it twice. She watched me read it. Is it wrong? She asked. No. I'm making a book so people remember who helped, in case something happens and people forget. That's a good idea, Cora. I know. I also made a map. She flipped to a page with a surprisingly accurate overhead drawing of the farmhouse, barn, pastures, fences, creek, tree lines, gate. She'd marked the watch posts with stars. She'd drawn the creek with blue crayon and labeled it Where They Come From. She'd drawn small X marks along the west fence with dates beside them. Those are the ones Uncle Dale shot, she said. I'm keeping count. Why? So we know if it's getting worse or better. Owen counts, but he doesn't write it down. She was 8. She was keeping a body count in a composition notebook with a unicorn on the cover. And the most disorienting part wasn't the content, it was the tone. She wasn't frightened. She wasn't performing bravery. She'd simply integrated the reality into her operating system faster than any adult on the farm, because children don't have a before to mourn. For Cora, the farm was the world now, and the world had sick people in the trees, and a body count that needed tracking, and a father who loved her the most and didn't know what to do. Doesn't know what to do now. I sat on the porch with her notebook in my lap and felt the last scaffolding of my self-concept as the family's protector finally buckle. Not collapse buckle. Bend under a weight it was never designed to bear. I had been the man who saw it coming. The man who moved first. The man who drove 400 miles on conviction. And now, I was the man whose 8-year-old daughter had assessed him with devastating accuracy and filed him in her census as the one defined by love and paralysis. Owen appeared. He looked at the notebook in my lap. He'd seen it before I could tell by the way his eyes moved past it. Dad, Thomas spotted movement in the south tree line. 3, maybe 4. Elena's on the scope. I'll come. We've got it. Stay with Cora. I watched him jog across the yard, rifle slung, checking angles, moving with a competence that had no precedent in the boy I'd driven here 2 weeks ago. The boy was gone. The boy had been replaced by someone effective and calm and increasingly foreign. Someone who'd inherited my alertness and converted it to a harder currency. Cora took her notebook back. Dad? Yeah. You brought us here. That was the important thing. The rest is just what comes after. She went inside. I heard her tell Lily to get under the table, calmly, like a game they'd practiced. And I heard Lily's small feet on the kitchen floor, and then 2 shots from the south fence, and then silence. The night after, with 4 more bodies in the burn pile by the creek and the smell of smoke flavoring everything, I made the decision that I'd been avoiding since the first morning Owen posted his watch schedule on the kitchen wall. I walked to the barn, where Owen was cleaning the .22 by lantern light. He had the bolt removed, the barrel propped on a hay bale, a rag threaded through on a pull-through cord. His hands moved with practiced economy. He didn't look up when I came in. Owen? Yeah. I want to talk to you about something, and I need you to listen before you respond. He set down the rag, looked at me. Lantern light caught his face from below, and for a moment I saw Dale in him, the angular jaw, the patient watchfulness, the willingness to hear a thing out before reacting. He'd gotten that from his uncles, or he'd always had it, and the crisis had burned away the adolescence concealing it. You're better at this than me. He didn't argue, didn't deflect, didn't say, no, Dad. He waited. You're better at the tactical decisions. You're better under pressure. You read the terrain faster. You react cleaner. You shoot straighter. Dale sees it. Thomas sees it. Elena sees it. Your sister sees it. She put it in her notebook. The smallest flicker crossed his face. He'd seen the notebook, but he hadn't known I'd read it. I'm not saying this to make you feel good. I'm saying it because the way things are going, I'm a bottleneck. People are routing around me to get to you and Dale. And every time they do that, they lose time. I'm the guy who saw it coming, and that was worth everything 2 weeks ago. And it's worth nothing now. Now it's about response, and response is your language. Dad, let me finish. I'm going to step into a support role, officially, in front of everyone. I'm going to tell Dale tomorrow that operational decisions run through you and him, not through me. You don't have to do that. Yeah, I do. Because if I don't, what happens is worse. What happens is people keep deferring to me out of politeness and ignoring my calls when it matters, and one of those ignored calls is going to cost somebody. I'd rather choose to step back than get dragged back after someone dies. He was quiet for a long time. The lantern hissed. Sargent shifted in his sleep by the barn door. I could hear the cattle breathing in the near pasture, that collective low rhythm that sounds like the earth itself, exhaling. I don't want to be in charge of you, Owen said. You won't be. Dale's in charge. You're his right hand. I searched for the word. I'm logistics, inventory. The Census Corps is already doing better than me. He almost smiled, not quite. She's thorough. She's terrifying. She's adapting. Faster than me? Faster than everyone. He picked up the rag, then put it down again. Dad, what you did pulling us out, driving here, that wasn't nothing. That was everything. Without that, we'd be in the house right now. We'd probably be dead. I know. So don't act like you failed. I'm not acting like I failed. I'm acting like I'm finished with the part I was built for. And the next part needs someone else. He held my gaze. And I saw it happen, the last structural girder of the old hierarchy between us. The one where I decided and he complied. Where I knew and he learned. Where I was large and he was small, I felt it shift. Not break, not collapse. Shift, like tectonic plates adjusting to a new reality. Grinding but moving, settling into a configuration that would hold weight differently. Okay, he said, but I'm going to ask your opinion. Every time. And you're going to give it honestly, not just agree with whatever I say. Deal. And you still have to tell me when I'm wrong. Owen, you haven't been wrong yet. I will be. And when I am, I need you to be the one who catches it. Because Dale won't. Dale will assume I've thought it through. You'll know I haven't because you know how I think. He was right. I knew his mind because I'd built half of it. The other half was Rachel's. The part that ran toward the emergency. The part that calculated under fire. The part that couldn't leave. But the architecture was mine. The pattern recognition, the early warning, the willingness to move first on insufficient data. He'd inherited the instinct and refined the execution. And what he was asking me for now was not leadership, but calibration. Be the instrument that checks the instrument. It was the smallest role I'd ever played in my own family. It was the most important, I told Dale the next morning. He was shoeing a horse, one of 2 Belgians that had wandered onto the property Wednesday. Draft horses from a farm that no longer had anyone to draft for. Dale had taken them in without discussion, the way he'd taken in the Kellers and the Crows and Elena and me and my children, absorbing strays into the working organism of the farm because that was what farms did. I'm stepping back, I said. Owen and you make the calls. I'm supply and support. Dale didn't look up from the hoof. That took guts. It took 2 weeks too long. No. It took exactly the right amount of time, because if you'd done it sooner, he wouldn't have been ready to hear it. And if you'd done it later, someone would have gotten hurt. He set the hoof down and straightened, pressing his hands into his lower back. You know what your problem is, Marcus? I've got a list. Your problem is you think foresight was the easy part. It wasn't. 99 men out of 100 would have gone to work that Tuesday and hoped for the best. You pulled your kids out of school and drove 400 miles on a hunch. That's not easy. That's the hardest thing, acting before the evidence is conclusive, while everyone you love thinks you're cracking up. The tactical stuff Owen does, that's reaction. Fast, good reaction, but reaction. You did something harder. You acted on a future that didn't exist yet. And now the future's here and I'm useless in it. You're not useless. You're repositioned. There's a difference. He went back to the horse. I went to the kitchen and sat with Martin Crow, who was inventorying the root cellar, and Phyllis, who was organizing the pantry, and I counted cans with them and recorded numbers in a ledger and felt, for the first time, in 2 weeks, like I was standing on a surface that matched my actual height. That afternoon, Owen left operation without me. A supply run to the Hensley place for the remaining diesel. He took Thomas and Elena. He briefed Dale before leaving. He briefed me. He asked my opinion on the route. I suggested the creek road instead of the county road because I'd noticed deer tracks redirecting away from the west corridor, which meant something was using that path more than deer were comfortable with. He adjusted the route. "Good catch," he said. "That's the job." He left. I stood at the gate and watched the truck disappear. Cora stood beside me, notebook in hand. "He'll be fine," she said. "I know. You're scared anyway. That's also the job." She wrote something in her notebook. I didn't ask what. Owen came back at 4 with a full truck and no injuries. He'd cleared 2 from the Hensley barn new one, not the church clothes group from before. He reported to Dale first, then to me, then ate 2 plates of Phyllis's bean soup and naan, and fell asleep on the couch at 7 p.m. And for 1 hour, he looked 14 again, slack-jawed and twitching in a dream. And I covered him with a blanket and stood over him and let myself have that 1 hour of pretending he was just a sleeping boy on his uncle's couch, and the world outside was just the world. That night, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Nurse Delgado at Briarfield Memorial. Your wife asked me to tell you she's alive. Unit is holding. She says she loves the kids and she's proud of you. She says, you were right." I read it on the porch in the dark. I read it until the screen dimmed. I pressed it to my chest, which is a thing I didn't know I'd ever do with a phone, and I breathed. She says you were right. Right. The word I'd chased for 2 weeks. The validation I'd craved from every person in my life. The proof that the anxious man wasn't anxious, but prescient. She said I was right. And the word, arriving, was smaller than I'd imagined. Because being right had cost me my role in my family, my authority over my son, my daughter's faith in my competence, and 400 miles of distance from the woman who finally believed me. Being right was the entry fee. Everything after it was the price. It is November now. The farm holds 23 people across 2 houses and the converted barn loft. Dale runs the land. Owen runs security with Thomas. Elena runs medical. Martin keeps the power on. Phyllis keeps the food counted. Scott, to everyone's surprise, turned out to be an exceptional forager. Something about the analytical mind applied to wild edibles. Cora keeps the census. She's on her 3rd notebook. I run inventory. I maintain the water system. I check the fences for wear. I advise when asked and stay quiet when not. I am the man who brought his children here, and that fact earns me a seat at the table, and the seat is enough. Owen asked my opinion this morning about extending the perimeter. I told him the creek bed was a liability and he should consider a 2nd fence line. He said he'd already drawn it up but wanted to hear me say it first. I don't know if that's kindness or tactics. It might be both. Rachel is alive. Delgado texts every 6 days. The hospital holds. Rachel runs a ward. She is 400 miles east, doing what she does, running toward it. And I am here, doing what I did. One right thing, followed by the long, humbling work of living in its consequences. Cora's census entry for me has been updated. It reads, Mrs. Mom, still scared, but the good kind. The good kind. I'll take it.